Seedling maintenance during winter time. It's mid-February and this is a bed of seedlings that were grown from pips planted roughly this time last year. So they've made one season's growth, and as you can see the heights are quite variable, ranging from the lowest at 30 to 40 centimetres to those that have managed to make maybe 1.5 metres growth. There are several things I do during winter time. It includes topping up the soil in the pots with usually a mixture of 50% topsoil, 50% multi-purpose compost, removing any weeds that might have grown during the autumn time, and applying fertiliser. Fertiliser I used is a controlled release compound fertiliser containing all the nutrients the seedlings require. And I apply 16 grams of this particular brand, which provides the equivalent of about 2.5 grams of nitrogen. These 1-year seedlings, I just apply the fertiliser as top dressing. And this is the only fertiliser application I'll make all year, because this particular formulation has a 9-month release period that's temperature dependent. Once the fertiliser is applied, I simply work it into the topsoil, top of the pots, just by a couple of centimetres, just to help the distribution. I try not to have too much of an accumulation around the immediate base of the seedling. There are a couple of other maintenance jobs that are necessary during winter time. The first of these is to check that the stakes are in good shape and to retie any of the seedlings that have come away from the stakes. And the second is to perform any pruning that's necessary. Generally, seedlings don't need to be pruned because the objective at this stage of their life cycle is for them to make as much extension growth up the main stem as possible in order to pass through the juvenile phase of development and enter the adult phase where they're able to flower. This is determined by the number of internodes at the main stem. Until they've reached 70 internodes, that is, intervals between successive leaves, they're in the juvenile phase. Between 70 and 122 internodes, they can flower, but they won't necessarily flower. But once they've reached 122 internodes, they will flower. So you don't want to cut back the leading growth unless it's diseased. Hence, I really try and perform as little pruning as possible. Occasionally it is necessary where during the first season of growth there's been an attack by insect pests on the terminal bud, or there's a little bit of dieback perhaps due to severe frost, but in general I leave them alone. This is an example of a 1-year-old seedling that I will probably prune very lightly this February, because it's still retaining 1 or 2 of the leaves that developed last autumn. However, they look damaged and unlikely to grow away healthily this spring, so I'll probably just tip the seedling back by 1 bud and hope that the new growth will come out of that bud there. As I say, the objective of these early years of growth is to make as much vertical extension growth on the main stem as you can. In contrast, this seedling has a very healthy terminal bud on its main stem, and so I'll leave this unpruned. These are some seedlings that have been growing now for 4 years, and they're still in the original pots, and they seem to be doing quite well. These tall, single-stemmed seedlings are the form that I'm trying to encourage by doing as little pruning the main stem as I can. So what we've got here are short spurs, potentially fruit-bearing spurs, developing on the 2-year-old wood, and I've left 1 or 2 longer laterals, some of which I've tipped back, for example that one, and others that I've left untipped in case the seedling turns out to be tip-bearing rather than spur-bearing. But with a seedling about 2 meters plus in height, I know that I've got roughly 120, maybe 130 internodes up the entire length of the trunk. So that's the ideal. A fast-growing, rapidly elongated seedling that's going to go through the juvenile phase relatively rapidly. The reality can be sometimes very different. For example, again, this is a 4-year-old seedling that's barely 60 centimetres high and probably only has 60 to 70 internodes and is unlikely to have gone beyond the juvenile phase.